Hi everybody, how's it going? Yay, we have some people. I am so delighted that we are discussing this brilliant, beautiful and very life-affirming book that's Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. And before we get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who left the most wonderful comments and shared stories of their own lives. And just the response to reading this book was amazing. And it's kind of why I wanted to pick it for this month, because I feel like everyone's going through a little bit of a tough time, and I knew his writing. I hadn't read this before, but I knew he was a good person to spend some time with, and I'm glad I wasn't wrong. And I'm glad that everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. And, you know, even I read it a few weeks ago, and then today I was spending some time going back over it and picking out some bits and putting in some sticky bits. And just going through your questions, and it was just so amazing to, you know, I think we've been all so isolated recently, and, you know, this little community that we've all created together has been so special and so wonderful during this whole lockdown. And going through the questions and, you know, sort of hearing from you guys just was so lovely today. So thank you for the last couple of hours that I've spent doing this, and also just for the last few months. So I'm gonna just, I don't know, I think I'm just gonna go straight into questions, and then I've written down excerpts of the book that relate to some of the questions, and I feel like we'll sort of take a question, read part of the book, and then go back and forth that way. So, you know how I like to just wing it. But I'm so glad that the response to how the book made people feel has been so positive, because that's what I really wanted. I wanted us all to feel a little bit of, I don't know whether it's catharsis or just that we're not alone, and that these feelings that a lot of us have, you know, probably been having, or that people might have experienced throughout their lives, that, you know, these are not, we're not alone in feeling sometimes a little like lost or fearful or just overwhelmed, I suppose. And it was so lovely of Matt to so beautifully share his journey, and that we can all feel a little bit better about ours. So where's Eddie? Somebody's asking. I'm still not in my own home. I have yet to get back to Scotland, but I've just been, and I apologize as well that this is so delayed, this particular month's book club. As most of you know, I was away filming, so I was in a hotel for 7 weeks, and I had the worst internet, and I felt like it just was better if I waited till I got out of there so we could have a proper conversation. And this better not mean that the internet gods all of a sudden strike me down. Okay, so the first question is from, and I'm going to butcher everybody's name, so I apologize, is from Laura X Alvin. And so this was a lovely thing, and lots of people, and, you know, so I've just picked out sort of the first people that I read the questions from, but a lot of people picked out this and asked about this. And this is something that, you know, really struck a chord with me as well. So she wanted to know, how do we feel happy when we are encouraged to feel anxious? And it's relating to page 181. So let's go there. And it was beautiful, this sort of succinct way that Matt had of distilling this idea. And I'll just read and let him say it. But the world is increasingly designed to depress us. Happiness isn't very good for the economy. If we were happy with what we had, why would we need more? How do you sell an anti-aging moisturizer? You make someone worry about aging. How do you get people to vote for a political party? You make them worry about immigration. How do you get them to buy insurance? By making them worry about everything. How do you get them to have plastic surgery? By highlighting their physical flaws. How do you get them to watch a TV show? By making them worry about missing out. How do you get them to buy a new smartphone? By making them feel like they are left behind. To be calm becomes a kind of revolutionary act. To be happy with your own non-upgraded existence, to be comfortable with our messy human selves would not be good for business. Yet we have no other world to live in. And actually, when we really look closely, the world of stuff and advertising is not really life. Life is the other stuff. Life is what is left when you take all that crap away, or at least ignore it for a while. Life is the people who love you. No one will ever choose to stay alive for an iPhone. It's the people we reach via the iPhone that matter. And once we begin to recover and to live again, we do so with new eyes. Things become clearer and we are aware of things we weren't aware of before. Now, this struck a huge chord with me because of, obviously, I think this kind of idea affects everybody, but also a lot of my life I have sort of worked in these industries that promote these unattainable dreams and these unattainable things. And, you know, I started modeling when I was 19 and they're selling, you know, beauty products to women supposedly in their 40s and 50s and using 18 and 19-year-olds and sometimes 16-year-olds to tell them this product makes your skin look like this, and it's bullshit. And so, you know, and it's not something that I haven't thought about before or haven't grappled with. And I often wonder about my part in this kind of fantasy that gets sold and that makes people feel bad about themselves. And it's never something that I wanted to do. You know, I've always wanted to be an actor, to tell stories. And yet somehow, because it's a commercial endeavor, you know, networks don't want your TV show just to put on a TV show. They want your TV show so that they can sell advertisement around it and make money. And it's really strange when you find yourself caught up in that loop and you know, and yet be, at the same time, be susceptible to it. So even from the inside, you know exactly what they're doing, but yet it affects you in the same way. And it's a really difficult thing, I think, for all of us to be, for all of us to kind of resist that. And I think, you know, somebody also mentioned the social dilemma, and I'm going to talk about that later too. But it is this thing of like, we aren't here to just be consumers. And I think that that's something that we all have to really, really fight against, because it's so hard, because you're bombarded everywhere, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, with some sort of messaging and some sort of like imagery that tells you that you're inadequate or that what you have isn't sufficient, and none of it makes us happier. And, you know, I think about during this whole lockdown, I didn't buy one item of clothing because I was like, well, where am I going? You know, I don't need anything. And yet, you know, lockdown was over. I mean, I went away to work, so I didn't buy anything, but like I've been in London for like 2 days and I'm like, ooh, when do I go shopping? It's like, I don't need this stuff. So, and I think also sometimes that can make you feel even worse. And I think that there's something sometimes about these like quick highs. And I think that that's something that we need to sort of, or I need, I mean, I don't know, I'm not telling anybody what to do, but it's something I observe about myself, where when I am feeling low and I think I'm going to do something that's going to make me feel better, and when it's something that's not substantial, you get that really quick high for very few minutes, and then you feel even worse. And so, you know, I think I'm going to talk about my ideas with social media, and it's all a bit controversial because we're doing it on social media. But I think we have entered into a time where there's going to have to be a reckoning, because we're not playing on a level field, you know, and what we're being subjected to is so beyond our own mind's ability to counteract, that something's going to have to be done. Anyway, I will talk more about this because it's obviously something I feel quite passionate about, and I don't know what I just started doing an impression of my friend Sarah, who does an impression of her dad, I think. But yeah, that's that. Okay, so question 2 is from El Mucanto and Anna, Bia and Juliana. And all it says is page 130. I forgot to write the question, I guess. So let's go to page 130 and see if I can remember what that was. Oh, this is about reading. Yes, so obviously I think this chapter spoke to everyone. You know, I have been a massive reader since I was a child. Some of you know the story, like for many years we didn't have TV, but what we did do was go to the library every week. And it was always that thing of going to pick your 3 books. And I have lost myself in reading all my life. And I think that I suffered quite a bit from bad mental health as a child, and didn't really understand what I was going through, and didn't understand why life seemed to be so much more difficult for me than my siblings, or I made it more difficult, or and I had all of these emotions, and I used to have very dark spells, and I didn't know what to do about it. And reading was an escape for me then. And it brought all of these incredible worlds right into our tiny little village in the middle of nowhere in Ireland, where it just seemed like I didn't understand the people around me and they didn't really understand me, or that's how it felt at the time. And it was just so important to me. Reading was so important to me, and it has definitely shaped who I am. And let's read some of Matt's passages, or we'll be here for like 3 hours, and nobody needs that. There is this idea that you either read to escape or you read to find yourself. I don't really see the difference. We find ourselves through the process of escaping. It is not where we are, but where we want to go and all that. Is there no way out of the mind? Sylvia Plath famously asked. I had been interested in this question, what it meant, what the answers might be, ever since I had come across it as a teenager in a book of quotations. If there is a way out, a way that isn't death itself, then the exit route is through words. But rather than leave the mind entirely, words help us leave a mind and give us the building blocks to build another one, similar but better, nearby to the old one but with firmer foundations and very often a better view. The object of art is to give life a shape, said Shakespeare, and in my life and in my mess of a mind needed shape. I had lost the plot. There was no linear narrative of me. There was just mess and chaos. So yes, I loved external narratives for the hope they offered, films, TV dramas, and most of all books. They were, in and of themselves, reasons to stay alive. Every book written is the product of a human mind in a particular state, and all the books together, and you get the end sum of humanity. Add all the books together, and you get the end sum of humanity. Every time I read a great book, I felt I was reading a kind of map, a treasure map, and the treasure I was being directed to was an actual fact myself. But each map was incomplete, and I would only locate the treasure if I read all the books. And so the process of finding my best self was an endless quest, and books themselves seemed to me to reflect this idea, which is why the plot of every book ever can be boiled down to someone is looking for something. I totally I just agree with him on this. I think, and I think many of us think, I think sometimes when you're feeling certain feelings and emotions and you don't really understand, or you don't quite have the narrative or the clarity with which to sort of distill your thought process or distill what you're thinking, and then you read it in a book and you're like, that's exactly, and you have those aha moments and you're like, that's what I'm feeling, or it evokes something in you. So I think it's not just one thing or the other. It's not just escaping or finding. It's both, and it's so beautiful the way he describes that. So God, we're only in question 3 and I picked out 15, so I'll stop waffling so much. So this is from Maria Isabel, sorry. And her question was she talked a little bit about the chapter on famous people, and she wanted to ask, how does the modelling acting industry affect mental health of those that are in it? And I thought that this was kind of interesting because, number one, I think this sort of distinction of this industry is having something special compared to any other industry is not true. But we do have the ability as being in the public eye and having some sort of a platform to be able to share our experiences. And in that way, I think it can be good because, as Matt said, it's helpful to know that other people are going through it. And not that we don't know that, but having that reminder and seeing people in a position of what looks like success, because that's very relative as well. And yet have them sort of say, well, no, look, I struggle with all these things too. I mean, I think that can be helpful. And I know it was helpful to me, and has been helpful to me when I've been going through tough times and had times where I felt terrible. And, I will say one thing about the, modelling and acting and this kind of thing of being inside the beast, and sort of people have a perception, and I think that's one of the things that makes it slightly strange, especially when you don't feel inside, the way that people appear to, or the people think that you should be, because there's an illusion put forward. I'm just Katrina. I'm just the girl who grew up in the country and then was lucky enough to get some great jobs and loves what she's doing. But I'm still just me, and I'm still going through all the struggles of life, the same as every single other person. And yet, when we go and do these big events, and, and I have a team of people putting me together and making me look a certain way. And, I realize that there's an image put forward that portrays this kind of success, happiness, all of that. And it's not always the case. And I think that there's also a danger within that industry, I think, of people losing touch with reality and losing, I guess, perspective on the things that are really important, because you're sort of put up on a pedestal, and, which is an unreal thing. But if you believe in that, and, there's I could get into the whole thing of like insecurity masked by ego and the dangers of that and all of that kind of thing, but we would definitely be here all night. But I do think it's interesting, and I think, I think that, I hope that more and more people are realizing that this sort of idea of putting forward these unrealistic images, that it's not helpful for anyone. It's not helpful for the person that's behind it, and it's not helpful for society to sort of be subjected to that or be bombarded by that. But I do think, this is one of the good things, the plus side of social media versus the downside, is that people are, having much more one-on-one interactions, and you can dispel those notions, or you can sort of have a more normal interaction rather than it being this sort of very curated one that's sort of put forward, I think. But let's move on. Well, I think let's read a bit from that, actually. 159. I still think it's very strange that I just sit here and talk to myself. One day we're going to have to get everyone in a room together, and when this COVID craziness is over, let's do that. Let's have a big book club meeting, and then I won't feel so crazy talking to myself. Okay. Depression makes you feel alone. That's one of its main symptoms, so it helps to know you are not alone. Given the nature of our society and a confessional celebrity culture, it is often famous people that we hear about having troubles, but it doesn't matter. The more we hear, the better. Well, not always. Being a writer, I don't particularly like thinking about Ernest Hemingway and what he did with his gun, or Sylvia Plath's head in her oven. I didn't even like contemplating too deeply non-writer Vincent van Gogh, or Van Gogh, it's very controversial, and his ear. And when I heard about the contemporary writer I admired, David Foster Wallace, hanging himself on the 12th of September 2008, it actually sparked in me my worst bout of depression since the really bad times. And it doesn't have to be writers. I was one of millions of people not just saddened by Robin Williams' death, but scared of it, as if it somehow made it more likely for us to end up the same way. But then most people with depression, even most famous people with depression, don't end up committing suicide. Mark Twain suffered depression and died of a heart attack. Tennessee Williams died from accidentally choking on the cap of a bottle of eye drops that he frequently used. And yeah, then he goes on. I was very, very curious by that. I'd never heard that about Mark Twain, or Tennessee Williams, sorry. But there is a lot of cynicism about depressed celebrities, as if after a certain amount of success and money, a human being becomes immune to mental illness. It is only mental illness that people seem to say this about. They don't say it about the flu, for instance. Unlike a book or a film, depression doesn't have to be about something. Also, one of the things depression does, that it makes you feel guilt. Depression says, look at you with your nice life and your nice boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, kids, dog, sofa, Twitter followers, with your good job, with your lack of physical health problems, with your holiday in Rome to look forward to, with your mortgage nearly paid off, with your non-divorced parents and your whatever, on and on and on. Actually, depression can be exasperated by things being all right externally, because the gulf between what you are feeling and what you're expected to feel becomes larger. And if you feel the same amount of depression as someone would naturally feel in a prisoner of war camp, but you are not in a prisoner of war camp and are instead in a nice semi-detached house in the free world, then you think, crap, this is everything I've ever wanted. Why aren't I happy? And then he quotes the Talking Heads song, which I do love. But yeah, I think that that's something that, we all have, or a lot of people experience, is that sometimes even when everything is going right, you don't always feel that way inside, and it gets compounded by the fact that you're like, why do I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way. And that can be part of the struggle sometimes. But let's move on. I'm not saying hi to anybody. I'm seeing all these names flash by. It's like, hello, everyone. Jacqueline Graciano, Haley Beaupre. Please have a glass of wine next to me. No, I'm actually having a gluten-free beer, and it's quite tasty. So we're going to, oh my God, I'm only on question 4, guys. Alexia Burrus. asked about the anti-medication narrative. What was your opinion on this narrative choice and how it affects the audience? But I think Matt spoke quite clearly about the fact that for him that was the choice he made. And, you know, I think it's very important that everyone makes the right decision for themselves. And that you talk to somebody and get proper medical advice. You know, for me, the thing that I found helps the most was going into therapy. I think it's the best gift I've ever given myself, and I didn't get to it until I was in my very early 30s, but it was essential, and it's something that, you know, I'm very fortunate that I could afford then. I realize that it's not always accessible to everybody, and that's really difficult. But I think everyone is so unique, and everyone's experience with either depression or anxiety, or even just mental health struggles, it is so individual. And you know, I think that one of the things, and there's sort of somebody asked a question about it later, in terms of like this being written from a man's perspective and how important it is for men to talk about their mental health issues. Sorry, beer. But one of the things that I think is has been so helpful to me is having such a strong group of friends, girlfriends that I can talk to. And I think that that's often the difference between when men and women struggle with things like this, that men tend not to have, I mean, this is obviously a generalization, but they tend not to have friendships where they feel that they can discuss this kind of stuff with their other guy friends. And that's, I hope, changing. And I think it's slightly changing, and you see much more, especially in the UK at the moment. There's these great initiatives where, you know, I think it's Prince William actually is and different people like that. And there's a lot of footballers are coming out, and obviously Matt talking about mental health issues and trying to start that conversation. But I have always felt that talking about things helps me, because I'm the kind of person, I didn't have an experience like Matt's. I didn't have this kind of one catastrophic breakdown, but I tend to retreat, and I tend to, you know, when things are really bothering me, just sort of shut down. And it's really been my friends that have sort of dragged me out of that have always helped me. So I do think medication can be super beneficial to people who have chemical imbalances in their brain. And I think that, you know, it should be treated by a professional. But I also think there's an over prescribing of Zoloft and all of these things sometimes. And it's like, oh, you're not feeling well, take a pill. Where I think talk therapy and other kinds of therapy, cognitive therapy, I think can help really get to the root and help. You know, I remember, and my science on this is going to be so layman, so anyone who's really a scientist, I'm really sorry. But one of my best friends, her dad is a neurologist, and I remember him talking about the synapses in our brains, like pathways, and our thoughts are via these synapses. This is where it's all going to get very, very like murky. But it's almost like if you have these repeating patterns of thoughts, you strengthen these synapses. And it's almost like as if if you're about to cross a field and you walk on the same pathway every single day and you keep doing that, and it sort of goes from the grass wears away, and then you're in the mud, and then you sort of create like a deep path. And that's what can happen with these negative thoughts and these negative ideas. And you have to find ways of creating new pathways and much more positive and taking a different route. Or at least that's how I understood it. I'm just going to move on to the next question. Let me see somebody. Yeah. Moo said pharmaceutical companies pushing drugs is a huge issue. This is true, but it's like, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think for certain people it can be really successful and really helpful, but I do think that there's an overprescription. But hey, I think we need to just encourage everybody to find the best path for themselves. Okay, so God, Fontes Gabby, sorry if I'm butchering your name, wants to ask about Andrea, or Andrea, and what do you think, can love save a person? And she shared that she is 20 years old and that she's in university, and that because of COVID and everything, she feels like her life's not going to amount to anything, and she wanted to know if I've ever felt that way. And I would say yes. It took me a very long time to find my path. I as I said, from a very young age, I sort of had mental health issues and really struggled, and unlike Matt, I self-medicated, and I would drink far too much, far too young, and that was sort of my way of getting through things and getting through anxious times, and then that would only exasperate things and make me feel worse. And even through my 20s I really struggled, and I would go through bouts and wasn't living the healthiest of lifestyles, and but it took me a long time, and part of that was finding a way of living an authentic life, as in finding the thing that made me really happy and that I could put my energy into in a really positive way. I mean, that's what acting has done for me. It's made me find my peace within myself. I mean, a bit like I think Matt said with his writing, and I really struggled for a long time, and I think that this idea that we need to have this like timeline where it's like, okay, you come out of school, you go to university, and then what you're going to do immediately, and then you get into it, and all of a sudden you're successful in your early 20s. But I would counter that, and I was very lucky that when I was modeling, I was able to afford to do a lot of things, and I was working well, but it was very unhappy. And I think you just have to have patience and know that things do get better and life gets better, and the more you grow and the more you walk through the fear of things each time, not only does that make you feel better about yourself, and you feel stronger and you feel wiser, and if you can, I would travel, because that's always helped me and made me feel better about the world and about humanity and about myself. But I know it's a very stressful time, and I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in university during COVID. This is insane times. But it does get better, I promise. And back to Andrea, I would love to know what she thought. I mean, she sounds like an absolute patient angel. I don't know that I've been so patient in my life with people that I've lived with who were struggling, or not even struggling. I don't think I've been that patient with anyone in my life. I think we should all ask Matt to let Andrea share her side of the story someday. I don't think he's letting her. I'm sure she doesn't want to. But yeah, I think it's amazing to have people who love you, and I think that that's something that we can sometimes push away when we're not feeling great, but that ability to actually let someone be there for you is a really great moment when you can do that. And as Matt says, love is a reason to live. And I can't remember the quote, but I'll find it. We'll come back to that. I've probably written it down somewhere. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to go to Kelly E. Lawston. So she said the best way to beat a monster is to find a scarier one, from Matt's chapter on that. And has this ever been a driving force for you? Do you think trading one monster for another has led to some of the choices that you've made? You know, I don't know, because I've never thought about, when I've been in those things, I think one thing, I've never had that kind of anxiety of, you know, the panic attacks. Thank God I've never suffered from that. I mean, internal anxiety, yes, but the idea that I couldn't walk down the street, I don't think I've ever had that kind of problem. I mean, I think for me, the fear and of the unknown, in a weird way, I just never, I don't know how to describe this. I think I used to run a lot from my problems was the thing. And I think for me, finding new things and going to new places was always a really good way of feeling like I could leave behind some of my emotional turmoil. But you know, it follows you, funnily enough. So in the end, you just have to deal with it. But I think that was also maybe a driving force for some of the decisions I made. So I don't know that it was necessarily finding one monster to replace another. I think it was just, I was the monster I was trying to leave behind in the rear view mirror. But hey, we get through it in the end, don't we? So yeah, I'm going to read a little bit from what he says about that. This is where he talks about travel, because this obviously resonated with me.